Hello, and welcome back to Counseling Corner, brought to you by UC Davis Student Health and Counseling Services. Each episode, we will address a new mental health and wellness topic. I'm Dr. Karen Miller, and today we're talking more about the intersections of food, body, and culture, and what makes nutritional balance challenging. Today, I am joined by Registered Dietitian Jessica Wilson. Jessica holds a master's in human physiology and a bachelor's in clinical nutrition. Jessica has over 10 years of experience as a dietitian, and her work ranges from Division I athletes to undocumented Medi-Cal patients. She incorporates students' intersecting identities into their nutritional care and specializes in multicultural care, sports nutrition, and eating disorders. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks, Karen.
So why don't we start with overall in your clinical experience, what do you see as the role of culture in our thoughts about food and our bodies?
I see a lot of the impacts of Eurocentric ideals when it comes to bodies and food in our own perceptions of food and our body size, body shape. Oftentimes, folks will present to my office with and without eating disorders, discussing their perceptions of their culturally traditional foods. Often I think about white rice, right? And how in the US, quinoa, for example, is so much more elevated and morally superior to things like white rice and other grains. Culturally relevant foods, I've heard folks say that they know how to cook tacos, but that's not a healthy enough food once they get to Davis and hear all of the talk about farmers markets and whatnot.
Mhm.
And when it comes to bodies, I will often hear and say that folks want just a more, I guess, Eurocentric ideal when it comes to bodies rather than those that are more often seen in their families and reflected in their cultures. And oftentimes I see the impacts on how folks feel about their bodies based on the oppression that they experience day to day, right? So racism, fat phobia, thin centrism, and then like heteronormativity can really impact how I feel about my body. And
Mhm.
typically speaking, body image is about, or body image interventions are about like a false perception about their body. So if we could only fix how somebody feels about their body going out into regular typical society, they will have a normal body image. But for folks in non-Eurocentric, than ideal bodies, the reality is that their perceptions are often correct. Like the way that people perceive their bodies is oppressive.
Mhm. Mhm. That's powerful. Just thinking about all of those intersections there, and something that came up when you were saying that is that yes, it makes it very challenging then for people around food and their body size when in fact the messages that they're perceiving about themselves may be messages that are being overtly sent in our culture.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's not a perception, it's the
Mhm.
reality. It's the everyday, it's the bodies that are held up as, more valuable and more worthy of either positive feedback or praise. And so it is indeed not perception. It
Mhm.
impacts how we are able to, get jobs, if we're able to get interviews. That impacts people's thoughts about relationships, that impacts their undergrad and graduate relationship building and networking
Mhm.
capacities as well.
Yeah. So, from a nutritional standpoint, then, how do you intervene with students who are struggling with, I guess it's sort of combating their own internal, but also the external, right? The
Right.
thoughts around food, body, shape, size, the messages from family. that might be similar or different than those, the messages from culture, kind of our society as a whole. Um,
Definitely.
yeah.
Um, Oftentimes, nutritionally, we think it's all about like the macros and the micros of nutrients.
Mhm.
And we oftentimes separate the cultural aspect or the familial aspect of food. We try to simplify nutrition into just specifically nutrients and energy when some of it is more complex. Um, the familial aspects, the cultural aspects that come along with our food choices, how we feel about our food choices, whether or not we're eating food because, say, Eurocentric food
Mhm.
ideals are what we're striving for, or we're eating food that reminds us of pleasurable and happy times
Mhm.
growing up, or relationships that we're building, or just the capacity to sit with the foods that our families are eating without judgment about those as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm wondering more about specifically in this time of pandemic, um, what you've seen or heard from clients that maybe is making it even more challenging right now to parse out, just sitting with their own body image, being able to balance their own nutritional health, what things have maybe come across your table lately.
I think a lot of more scarcity has come up when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to the pandemic. Right at the beginning, there were so much more empty shelves and so much more messaging from family members about needing to conserve and needing to potentially eat less. And then the variety of foods that was available is oftentimes a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
Be it, fewer trips to the grocery store, or, just less of what is on the shelves. And for some families, that brings up a lot of historical trauma when it comes to not having enough food.
Mm-hmm.
So, perceptions of scarcity and real scarcity right now have impacted a lot of what folks are feeling about food and their food choices. So, scarcity is definitely something that comes up. And then being separated from family or being back home with family can also bring up their own individual challenges. So, oftentimes, say folks come to uh, undergrad or graduate school and are really looking for what their identities are outside of their family. So potentially um, getting more connected to, say, their ancestors or indigenous roots, and then going home to families who are potentially more focused on Eurocentric beauty standards is one way that I see things going. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other direction is somebody really working on like being okay with the body size that they have and going home and getting messages that their body size, usually larger bodies, is not okay, and that
Mm-hmm.
conforming to having thinner bodies is actually what is preferred for
Yeah.
that family, be it because of just general safety and survival. Right,
Mm-hmm.
as folks of color and communities of color, oftentimes conforming can be a survival tactic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is, all of this complexity and the intersections here are why I really love the resources that we have available at UC Davis. And, you and I have worked really closely with clients before, and being able to support the complexity between the relationship of food, body, and culture and family dynamics. And I'm wondering what other kinds of resources are available through the nutritional counseling and what you have, over at the Student Health and Wellness Center.
For a lot of this, I'll do some collaboration.
Mhm.
So folks are able to meet with me, and I've done and will do a lot of cultural exploration and what food, means in the context of family, but also for this individual. And I'll do some work with, what in decades past was culturally relevant for families, and is that something that you're interested in exploring?
Mhm.
I'll also do a lot of conversations with the CAN counselors on campus.
Awesome.
I think they're a great resource, for guiding students who are exploring, food, body, and culture,
Hmm.
um, and body image and what that means for folks who are, moving away from the childhood home. So,
Hmm.
nutrition services, can counselors, and then a lot of the student groups, I'll talk to people about how they can bring that up in their student organizations and what opportunities they have as individuals who are dealing with this on their own to have,
Hmm.
conversations that are culturally relevant.
That's great. Yeah. And beyond the food and culture conversations, I know that you all have also even a teaching kitchen and classes available. Um, and so maybe you can just give us a little bit of insight as to what are the other services even available through nutritional counseling.
Sure. So you mentioned Teaching Kitchen, and that's the cooking classes that we hold. And we'll do some that are more culturally specific. Two things that I'm thinking about is we'll do like a whole class of how to, 5 ways to use white rice. And that will be, meals, that'll be mango sticky rice. It'll just be a lot more bringing those foods back in because so often, you can imagine that dietitians or nutrition services are going to be the ones that are going to push for quinoa rather than white rice. So we're like, hey, these are foods are foods. There's no good foods. There's no bad foods. Foods are great. Let's, use them all. And oftentimes, actually, we're focused a lot more on food insecurity. So how
Hmm.
can the foods that we're eating be stuff that we get from the pantry on campus, how or what can you buy budget wise for
Hmm.
folks who are on um, CalFresh.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah.
CalFresh, of course, is a great resource on campus too.
Yeah.
We'll
Absolutely.
note as well that
Hmm.
to get to meet with one of the dietitians, um, one needs a referral from their primary care provider, and
Yeah.
that can happen via in person PCP appointments. Right now, um, in the context of global pandemic, students may have success messaging their PCP over Healthy Message and requesting a referral to the dietitian. That can be easier, especially if folks are not in the Davis area, right?
Yeah.
Because folks still have access to student health and counseling services wherever they are. So
Yeah.
getting, yeah, that referral can be really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. This was so informative. And I just, I know that our conversation was brief, and I think it just kind of illuminates the complexity and the intersections of food and body and culture. And I just want to really encourage anyone listening to this that if anything resonated with you today, if you felt really moved or started questioning things that were coming up for yourself and your family and your culture, or maybe things that you tell yourself, we encourage you to check out the nutritional services and see Jessica or the other dietitian, Sarah. She's also wonderful. And come and talk to one of us at the Student Health and Counseling Center. We love having these conversations and want to make sure that everyone is, one, getting what they need, right, nutritionally, and also just kind of being able to talk through all of these complex emotions and thoughts around food, body, and size. So, thank you again, Jessica. And until we talk again, this is Dr. Karen Miller wishing you hope, health, and happiness. Stay Aggie strong.